I was sitting in the coffee shop on Maple Street, the one I'd gone to every morning for the last 30 years, when my phone buzzed on the table. It was my only daughter, Sarah. Her voice came through cold and clipped, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed 100 times. "Dad, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow. Mark and I already sold your lake cabin and your truck. We needed the money for the move and some investments over there. We'll send you something later to help with rent. Bye." Just like that. No discussion, no warning, no "how are you holding up since Mom died?" She hung up before I could even get a word out. I stared at the phone for a long minute, the noise of the coffee shop fading around me. 42 years I'd spent raising her, working double shifts at the factory, skipping vacations so she could go to college, putting her needs ahead of my own every single day. And in one 2-minute phone call, she erased me like I was an old bill she finally paid off. But I didn't get angry, not right away. I took a slow sip of my black coffee, felt it burn all the way down, and smiled into the steam. Because there was something my dear daughter didn't know. My name is Adam Zoe. I'm 72 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. My wife, Ellen, passed 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed late, gone fast. One day, we were planning our 40th anniversary trip to the lake cabin. The next, I was holding her hand while machines beeped their final countdown. Her last words to me were simple. "Take care of yourself, Adam, and watch out for Sarah. She's impatient." I didn't understand what she meant then. After the funeral, Sarah was around more than usual. She helped sort through Ellen's clothes, organized the paperwork, even drove me to doctor's appointments. "Dad, you need to get checked out now that you're alone," she'd say, patting my arm with that smile I used to think meant love. Now I knew better. The lake cabin had been our family's heart for decades. Ellen and I bought it raw, 20 acres on Crystal Lake, a run-down little A-frame that smelled like pine and possibility. We fixed it up board by board, weekend by weekend. Sarah learned to fish there, had her first kiss on that dock, brought every boyfriend home to meet us under those rafters. We celebrated graduations, weddings, Thanksgivings. I built the stone fireplace with my own hands. Ellen planted the wildflower garden that still blooms every spring. Sarah knew what that place meant to me. And the truck, my old blue Chevy Silverado. I'd bought it new the year Sarah was born, kept it running through 3 engines and God knows how many miles. Ellen used to call it my other wife. I'd wash it every Sunday, same as always, even after her funeral. The cab still smelled faintly of her perfume and the cherry air freshener she liked. Sarah knew that too. When she hung up, I sat there in that worn vinyl booth, surrounded by retirees and young moms with strollers, and something shifted inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just a deep, quiet calm. Because 3 days before Ellen died, she'd pressed a thick manila envelope into my hands. "Adam," she'd whispered, her voice paper-thin, "put this in your top dresser drawer. Don't open it until you're ready. Promise me." I'd done what she asked, tucked it away, and, in the fog of grief, forgotten it existed. Until now. The waitress, Maria, who'd been pouring my coffee for 15 years, came by with the pot. "Everything okay, Mr. Zoe? You look different today." I smiled at her. "Better than okay, Maria. Best I've felt in months." She raised an eyebrow but refilled my cup without comment. I paid the bill, left her a $20 tip like always, and walked the 6 blocks home at a steady pace. No rush. The city moved around me, cars honking, kids on bikes, dogs barking behind fences. But I felt separate from it all, like I was watching a movie I'd already seen the ending of. Our house was a modest 2-story colonial on Elm Street, the one Ellen and I bought when Sarah was 5. White siding, blue shutters, wrap-around porch where we'd spent thousands of evenings in matching rocking chairs. Sarah probably assumed I'd have to sell it soon, move into some cramped senior apartment with thin walls and fluorescent lights. She had no idea. I went straight upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened the top drawer of the oak dresser Ellen's father had built. There it was, exactly where I'd left it. The envelope felt heavier than I remembered. My name was written on the front in Ellen's careful cursive. I carried it downstairs, sat in her rocking chair on the porch, and watched the neighborhood settle into evening. Kids playing basketball in driveways, sprinklers hissing on lawns, the smell of someone grilling steaks. Normal life. Beautiful. Ordinary life. When the sun dipped low enough that the streetlights flickered on, I went inside and locked the door, sat at the kitchen table under the warm pendant light, and finally opened the envelope. What I found inside stopped my heart for a full beat. Legal documents, property deeds, investment statements, bank records, and a letter in Ellen's handwriting dated just days before she went into the hospital for the last time. My dearest Adam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't stay longer. We had plans. More trips to the lake, more mornings on the porch, more everything. But I need you to know something I've kept secret for years. Not because I didn't trust you. I trusted you with my life. But because I wanted to protect you from worry and from Sarah's expectations. You remember how I handled our finances? How I insisted on managing the investments myself? Well, love, I was better at it than either of us realized. Over the years, I took our savings, every overtime check you worked, every bonus, every tax refund, and invested carefully, quietly. Property, stocks, small businesses, things that grew while we weren't looking. We don't just own the lake cabin in this house. We own 12 rental properties across 3 counties, a commercial building downtown, shares in companies that have done very well, and the apartment complex where Sarah and Mark live, I've owned that for 8 years through a holding company. You're wealthy, Adam. Not flashy rich, but comfortable for life rich. Millions, if we're being honest. I kept it secret because I wanted Sarah to love us for who we are, not what we have. Your kindness, my cooking, our family, not dollar signs. I was wrong. She married Mark 5 years ago, and I've watched her change. The way she talks about money now, the way she looks at our house, our things, like they're already hers to sell. The way Mark whispers to her when they think I'm not listening. I couldn't tell you while I was sick. You had enough to carry. But now, you know. Everything is in your name alone through the trust I set up. Sarah has no legal claim. The holding company, Zoe Family Investments, is yours completely. Use this wisely, my love. Protect yourself. And if Sarah ever shows her true colors, well, you always were the stronger one. All my love, forever, Ellen. I read the letter 3 times. Then I spread the documents across the table like a poker player laying out a royal flush. Property deeds, the lake cabin, clear title, our house, paid off, 7 single-family rentals, 3 duplexes, 1 small strip mall, and yes, the 24-unit apartment building downtown where Sarah and Mark had their fancy corner unit with the city views. Bank statements, accounts I'd never known existed, balances with more zeros than I'd ever dreamed of. Investment portfolios, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, dividend payers, steady growth for decades. Ellen had been a wizard, quiet, patient, brilliant. While I drove a forklift and came home tired, she'd been building an empire in silence. And Sarah thought she was leaving me penniless. I laughed then, really laughed, for the first time since Ellen's diagnosis. Deep, from the belly, the kind of laugh that surprises you with how good it feels. The next morning, the phone rang at 8 sharp. Sarah again. Dad? Hey, just wanted to check in before we head to the airport. We transferred some money into your account. 30% of what we got for the cabin and truck. Should tide you over for a while. It's not much, but it's fair, right? 30% of my own property. How generous, I said, keeping my voice mild. When's your flight? This afternoon. We'll be gone at least a year. Mark has this amazing opportunity in London. But don't worry, when we get settled, we'll help you find something smaller, more manageable for one person. Manageable, like I was a problem to be solved.
Safe travels, sweetheart, I said. Love you. Love you too, Dad. We'll call when we land. She hung up. I checked my bank app. Sure enough, a deposit for $48,000. They must have sold the cabin dirt cheap in a rush, probably worth 3 times that on a good day, and the truck for scrap value. I laughed again. That afternoon, I watched from the porch as the moving truck pulled up to their building across town. I'd driven by just to see. Mark loading designer suitcases, Sarah in sunglasses and new boots, both of them laughing like kids on Christmas morning. They never glanced toward my neighborhood, never waved goodbye. Good. I had decisions to make. First call was to David Lang, the attorney who'd handled Ellen's estate. He'd been at the funeral, pressed my hand, said to call if I ever needed anything. "Adam," he said when I reached him, voice warm, "how are you holding up?" "Better than expected, David. I found some documents Ellen left me, complicated ones. I need to see you tomorrow if possible." "Of course. First thing in the morning?" "Perfect." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Dreamed of Ellen rocking on the porch, smiling at me like she knew a secret. She did. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Dark slacks, the navy blazer Ellen always liked, the silver tie clips she'd given me for our 35th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw a man I hadn't seen in a long time. Straight-backed, clear-eyed, ready. David's office was in the old brick building downtown, the one with the brass plaques and creaking wood floors. He greeted me with coffee and concern, but when I laid out Ellen's documents, his expression shifted to something close to awe. "Adam, this is extraordinary." Ellen was, well, she was a financial genius, quietly. "I know that now." He flipped through pages, muttering numbers under his breath. "The apartment building alone, and these investment returns. You're set for life, multiple lives." "What can I do about the cabin and truck?" "The sale of the cabin was fraudulent. Sarah had no authority. We can void it immediately. The truck might be trickier, but doable." "Did she have power of attorney?" I felt my stomach drop. "She brought some papers after Ellen died, said they were for funeral arrangements and banking. I signed without reading everything. I was not myself." David nodded gently. "Grief makes us vulnerable, but if there was any deception—" "There was. We'll handle it. And David, I want this quiet for now. No one knows yet, especially not Sarah." He met my eyes, understood immediately. "Of course, discretion is part of the job." When I left his office, the city looked different, brighter, sharper, like I'd been walking around with fogged glasses and someone finally cleaned them. Over the next weeks, I played my part perfectly. To the neighbors, I was the grieving widower, quietly struggling. Mrs. Henderson next door brought casseroles. Mr. Patel from across the street offered to mow my lawn. The guys at the coffee shop asked careful questions about how I was managing. "I'm getting by," I'd say with a sad smile, "one day at a time." Inside, I was a man with a plan. David worked fast. The cabin sale was voided within 10 days. The buyers got their money back, no harm done. Title returned to me clean. The truck took longer, but we found it through a private sale to one of David's clients. Small compensation, and it was back in my driveway, shining under the carport like it had never left. The apartment building was more complex. Ellen had structured everything through layers of trusts and holding companies, bulletproof. Sarah and Mark paid rent, market rate naturally, to a management company that ultimately reported to me. They had no idea. I started visiting the cabin on weekends, drove up alone, sat on the dock where Ellen and I used to watch sunsets, and planned. Not revenge exactly, something better. Education. Sarah had been gone 3 weeks when Mrs. Henderson cornered me at the mailbox.
Adam, have you heard from Sarah? People are saying she and that husband of hers are having difficulties. Difficulties? Financial ones. My niece works at the bank, and apparently Mark took out loans against their apartment. Big ones. But now there's questions about ownership. I made the appropriate concerned dad face. That's terrible. I hope they're okay. Inside, I smiled. Everything was falling into place. David called one Friday morning. Adam, we have full control now. Everything's transferred cleanly into your direct name where needed. You're in the driver's seat. Good. Now I need one more thing. Name it. I want you to prepare an eviction notice for the apartment. 30 days. There was a pause. Adam, are you sure? Never been more sure of anything. It's your daughter. She stopped being my daughter the day she sold my home out from under me. Another pause. Understood. I'll have it ready. That same afternoon, Mrs. Henderson was back with fresh gossip. Sarah's coming home, Adam, alone. Mark stayed in Europe. Something about a business deal gone wrong. And debts. Lots of debts. I nodded slowly. Life's full of surprises. Isn't it, though? I sat on the porch that night with a glass of Ellen's favorite red wine, the bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Thank you, love, I whispered to the stars, for everything. Sarah landed on a Tuesday, alone, one suitcase. The eviction notice was delivered Wednesday morning. I gave her until Thursday to call. She waited until Friday. Dad? Her voice cracked on the word. I need to talk to you. It's bad. Come over any time, sweetheart. Door's always open. She arrived an hour later looking like hell, pale, thinner, eyes red from crying, designer clothes rumpled, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dad, I'm so sorry. For everything. For how I left, for the cabin, the truck, for all of it. We sat in the kitchen, same table where Ellen used to roll out pie crusts. What happened? Mark, there was never a job in London. It was all lies. He had debts, huge ones, used the apartment as collateral without telling me. And now we're being evicted. Some company called Zoe Family Investments owns the building. I've never even heard of it. Zoe Family Investments. Ellen's sense of humor, right to the end. That's awful, I said, pouring her coffee. And Mark left. Just gone, with whatever money was left. I came back with nothing. She started crying then, real tears. Part of me, the dad part, wanted to fix it right then, tell her everything, make it all go away. But the man Ellen had trusted, the one who'd learned from her wisdom, held back. You can stay here, Sarah, as long as you need. Really? After everything I did? This will always be your home. She hugged me desperately, like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. I hugged back, but my mind was already on phase 2. She moved in the next day. 2 suitcases and a box of clothes, everything she had left. I watched her unpack in her old room, the one with the faded unicorn wallpaper she loved at 10. She thought she was saving me by helping out, cooking meals, doing laundry, running errands. She had no idea who was really helping whom. And she had no idea what was coming next. Sarah settled into the house quickly, as if the past few months in Europe had been nothing more than a bad dream she was trying to forget. She took over her old bedroom, hung a few clothes in the closet, and set up a small desk by the window where she could job hunt on her laptop. She cooked dinner every night, simple things like spaghetti with meat sauce, baked chicken, the recipes Ellen had taught her years ago, and insisted on doing the grocery shopping and laundry. I'm not going to be a burden, Dad, she said one evening as she loaded the dishwasher. You've already done enough by letting me come back. I nodded, sipping my coffee at the kitchen table. You're never a burden, Sarah. This is your home. But every time she said things like that, I felt the weight of what she still didn't know pressing against my chest. She believed she had come back to rescue her poor widowed father from loneliness and financial ruin.
She believed the $48,000 share she and Mark had sent me was keeping the lights on. She believed the eviction notice from Zoe Family Investments was some cruel twist of fate orchestrated by a faceless corporation. She had no idea that the faceless corporation was me. The first few weeks were quiet. Sarah spent her days filling out online applications, rewriting her resume a dozen times, and going on interviews that never seemed to pan out. She came home exhausted but determined, telling me about retail management positions, office admin jobs, even a part-time barista role at the new coffee chain downtown. "They all say the same thing," she told me one night, flopping onto the couch with a sigh. "Great experience, but we're concerned about the gaps in employment and the recent address changes." I made sympathetic noises. "It'll work out. You're smart. Someone will see that." Inside, I was watching her closely. The old Sarah, the one who'd called me from that airport lounge and casually informed me she'd sold my cabin and truck, would have given up by now. She would have sulked, blamed the economy, demanded that Mark fix it, if Mark had still been around. But this Sarah got up every morning, put on the one decent blazer she still owned, and kept trying. Still, she hadn't learned everything yet, not even close. One Saturday morning, about a month after she moved in, Sarah came downstairs carrying a small wooden box I hadn't seen in years. It was the one Ellen kept in the hallway closet, full of old photos, birth certificates, insurance papers, the kind of things families accumulate and forget about. "Dad, I was looking for my social security card to update some job applications, and I found this." She set the box on the kitchen table. "There's an envelope in here addressed to you, in Mom's handwriting." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. I knew exactly what envelope she meant. Ellen had left two. The first one, the big one with all the financial documents, I had already opened. The second was smaller, sealed, and marked, "Open only if needed, E." I hadn't touched it yet. I hadn't felt the need. Until now.
"No," I said. "We can open it together." I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out a single sheet of heavy cream stationery and a small brass key. The letter was short. "My dearest Adam, if you're reading this second letter, it means things have gone further than I hoped. It means Sarah is struggling, and you're trying to decide how much to help her." The key opens Safety Deposit Box 182 at First National Bank, Downtown Branch. Inside, you'll find jewelry, family pieces, some I bought over the years, a few investments in gold and diamonds. Current value, roughly $250,000. This is meant as a cushion for emergencies, for Sarah, if she ever truly needs it. But only give it to her when she's ready to understand its real worth, not as a bailout, but as a reminder of what family actually means. Be wise, my love, and be strong. Forever yours, Ellen. Sarah read over my shoulder, her breath catching as she reached the part about the jewelry. "Dad, Mom had a safety deposit box? With $250,000 in jewelry?" Apparently," I said, turning the key over in my palm. It was small, old-fashioned, warm from my hand. "We should go see what's in it," Sarah said quickly. Maybe we could sell some pieces, help with bills, or get the cabin back, or—" I raised an eyebrow. "Or?" She flushed. "Or help me get back on my feet. I hate that I'm living off you like this." There it was, the first test. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. "Let's think about it," I said. "These are your mother's things, family heirlooms. We don't rush into selling them." Sarah nodded, but I could see the wheels turning, hope mixed with calculation. She was already imagining what $250,000 could do. Pay off whatever remaining debts Mark had left her with, get a new apartment, start over without the stain of failure. I let her imagine. 2 days later, we drove downtown to the bank. Sarah was quiet on the ride, fidgeting with the radio, checking her phone every few minutes. She'd dressed up, nice slacks, the blazer, subtle makeup, trying to look like someone who belonged in a bank vault. The vault attendant verified my ID, led us to the private room, and left us alone with the long metal box. When I opened it, Sarah actually gasped. Rings in velvet cases, a pearl necklace that had belonged to Ellen's grandmother, diamond earrings I remembered from our anniversary dinners, a sapphire bracelet Ellen wore the night Sarah graduated college, gold chains, brooches, loose stones in small pouches, all laid out on black felt like treasures from another life. Sarah lifted the pearl necklace carefully. "This is incredible." I picked up the small envelope tucked beneath the jewelry. Inside was Ellen's final inventory list, each piece described, appraised value noted in her precise handwriting. Total, $248,700. Sarah's eyes shone. "Dad, this could change everything. We could sell just a few pieces, get you some breathing room, help me get an apartment so I'm not crowding you." "You're not crowding me," I said gently. "But you know what I mean. I could pay rent, help with utilities, maybe even buy back some of what we lost." I let the silence stretch, watched her face as hope and guilt warred across it. Finally, I said, "Your mother left these for emergencies. This doesn't feel like an emergency yet." Sarah looked stricken. "But Dad—" "Let's take them home," I said. "We'll think about it." She didn't argue, but I could feel her disappointment like heat coming off pavement. Back at the house, she spread the jewelry across the dining room table under the chandelier, photographing each piece with her phone, researching comparable sales online. She made spreadsheets, called local jewelers for quotes. Within a week, she had offers ranging from $180,000 to $220,000, depending on which pieces we sold. "I think we could get $210,000 if we're patient," she told me one evening, eyes bright with purpose. "That's enough to clear the last of Mark's credit card debt that's still in my name, put a deposit on a small apartment, and leave plenty for you to live comfortably." I listened without interrupting. She kept talking, faster now. "I've been looking at one-bedrooms downtown. Nothing fancy, but close to public transit so I can keep job hunting. And I found a debt consolidation program that could handle the rest if I make payments." "And the cabin?" I asked quietly. "Well, the cabin's gone, Dad. I know that hurts, but maybe someday." "It's not gone." She blinked. "What?" "The sale was fraudulent. I already had it reversed." Sarah stared. "How? When? That would take lawyers, money." "I managed." She looked suddenly unsure. "And the truck?" "Back in the garage." Her mouth opened, closed. "Dad, how are you paying for all this?" I shrugged. Your mother was smarter with money than either of us knew. Sarah sat back, processing. A flicker of suspicion crossed her face, gone as quickly as it came. "That's amazing. Thank you. I'm so glad. You deserve that." But I could see the new calculations running behind her eyes. If I had money for lawyers, money to reverse sales, maybe I didn't need her to sell the jewelry all after all. Maybe she could keep more of it for herself. That night, David Lang called. "Adam, I have the full report on Mark's debts. It's worse than we thought. Over $300,000 total. Credit cards, personal loans, 2 car leases in Sarah's name that he co-signed without her knowing. Some of it's fraudulent. We can likely get her clear of the forged portions, but it'll take time and legal fees." "How much?" $50,000 to $70,000, depending on how hard the banks fight.
And if she just pays? Faster. But she'd need the cash up front. I thanked him and hung up. Sarah was in the living room, still researching jewelry sales, humming softly to herself. I watched her for a long minute. She was trying. She was working hard. She was remorseful. But she still saw the jewelry as a quick fix, a way to erase consequences instead of learning from them. She still thought in terms of transactions. Not yet. The next phase began slowly. Sarah started selling pieces anyway, quietly, without telling me at first. A pair of diamond studs, a gold Rolex Ellen had bought me for my 50th birthday but rarely wore. She got $28,000 for those 2 items alone. She used it to pay down the smallest credit card, the one with the highest interest.
I wanted to show I'm serious, she told me when I found out. I'm not waiting for a miracle. I nodded approval, let her think she was taking responsibility. Then the job offers started coming, low-paying, entry-level positions she would have laughed at a year ago. Receptionist at a dental office, night shift at a warehouse, cashier at a grocery store. She took the warehouse job. Third shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., loading boxes onto trucks. $18 an hour. The first week nearly broke her. She came home at dawn, shoulders slumped, hands blistered, smelling of cardboard and sweat. Collapsed on the couch without even taking off her steel-toed boots. It's harder than I thought, she admitted over breakfast, her dinner. But the people are nice, real, not like the corporate types I used to work with. I made her eggs and listened. Week 2, she made friends with a woman named Carla, 58, divorced, raising 2 grandkids on warehouse wages. Carla taught her tricks for lifting without hurting her back, shared her lunch, told stories about surviving worse. Sarah started bringing home leftovers for me to try, talking about union meetings, complaining about management in the same way I used to complain about the factory. One night she came home with a small paycheck stub in her hand. $612 after taxes, and laid it on the table like it was gold. Look, Dad, I earned this. All by myself. There was pride in her voice. Real pride. I felt something loosen in my chest. But still, I waited. David called again in early December. We have enough evidence to clear Sarah of 80% of the debt. The forged signatures are clear. Banks are backing down. We can file next week. Hold off, I said. Just a little longer. He didn't argue. Christmas came and Sarah insisted on decorating the house, the same way Ellen always had. She dragged the artificial tree up from the basement, strung lights on the porch, baked cookies from scratch, bought me a new flannel shirt with her warehouse money. We spent Christmas Eve wrapping gifts for Carla's grandkids. Things Sarah picked out herself. Books, art supplies, warm coats. On Christmas morning, she handed me a small box wrapped in newspaper. Inside was the pearl necklace, the one from the safety deposit box she hadn't sold. I couldn't, she said quietly. It was Grandma's. And Mom wore it on her wedding day. Some things aren't for sale. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you, sweetheart. That night, after she left for work, I sat in Ellen's rocking chair with the necklace in my hands and finally felt ready. The lesson was almost complete. Sarah had learned humility. She had learned the weight of honest work. She had learned that some things can't be bought back. But she still didn't know the full truth. And she still carried guilt like a stone in her pocket for what she'd done to me. It was time to lift that stone. David arranged everything for the second week of January. A meeting at his office, all documents prepared. The final revelation. Sarah thought we were going to discuss debt settlement options. She dressed carefully again, nervous about legal fees she still believed she couldn't afford. When we walked into David's conference room, he greeted us warmly and gestured to the 2 folders on the table. Sarah, your father has asked me to explain a few things today. Sarah glanced at me, confused. I nodded. It's time. David opened the first folder, the thick one. Property deeds, bank statements, investment summaries. Sarah's eyes scanned the pages, recognition dawning slowly. The lake cabin? Still in your name? Always was. The apartment building? Zoe Family Investments? That's me. She looked up at me, stunned. You've owned it this whole time? Since before you and Mark moved in. Her hands started to shake. The eviction notice.
Mine. Silence stretched thick and heavy. David cleared his throat gently. Your mother structured everything through trusts and holding companies. Your father has been the sole beneficiary since her passing. The fraudulent sales of the cabin and truck have been reversed. All assets are secure. Sarah turned to me, eyes filling. You knew. The whole time I was struggling. You knew you were worth millions, I finished. Yes. Why? Her voice broke. Why let me think we were broke? Why watch me sell Mom's jewelry, work night shifts, beg for apartments? Why? I leaned forward, took her hands in mine. Because you needed to understand what you almost threw away. Not the money, not the cabin or the truck. Me, your family, the things that can't be sold or replaced. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I treated you like garbage, she whispered. I deserved... No one deserves to be treated like garbage, not even when they've acted badly. But you needed to feel the weight of your choices, not just regret them in words, but feel them in your bones. She was crying openly now. And did I? She asked. Learn? I smiled softly. You kept the pearl necklace. You bought gifts for strangers' kids with your own money. You stood on your feet 12 hours a night loading boxes so you wouldn't be a burden. You chose dignity over easy fixes. David slid the second folder across the table. This contains the filings to clear you of all remaining debt, fraudulent and otherwise, paid in full. No more collectors, no more garnishments. Sarah stared at it like it might disappear. I don't understand, she said finally. After everything I did, why help me now? Because you're my daughter, I said simply, and because you finally understand what that means. She stood up slowly, came around the table, and hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time since she was a little girl. No desperation, no calculation, just love. When she pulled back, her face was wet but clear. I don't want the money. Any of it. I'll keep working. I'll pay my own way. You don't have to punish yourself forever. It's not punishment. It's respect. For you. For Mom. For myself. David smiled quietly from across the table. We left the office that afternoon into bright winter sunlight. Sarah walked taller, lighter. On the drive home, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Dad? Yeah? I want to do something with the cabin. What's that? Turn it into a place for women starting over, after bad marriages, debt, abuse, whatever. A few bedrooms, counseling, job training. Somewhere safe. I felt Ellen's presence so strongly in that moment I almost looked in the rearview mirror. I think your mother would love that, I said. Sarah smiled, a real one. Deep and genuine. She already does. The months after that January meeting passed like a quiet rebuilding. Sarah kept her warehouse job even after the debts were officially wiped clean and the collectors stopped calling. She moved her schedule to weekends so she could take classes during the week. First, a certificate in nonprofit management, then social work courses at the community college. She paid for every credit hour with her own paycheck, refusing any help from the accounts that now bore both our names. I didn't push. I'd learned patience from Ellen, and I was seeing it pay off in ways I never expected. We turned the lake cabin into what Sarah had envisioned, a small residential program called Ellen's Haven. 6 bedrooms, a communal kitchen, a garden out back where residents could grow vegetables and find some peace. We partnered with local shelters and domestic violence agencies. The first woman arrived in April, a young mother with 2 kids fleeing an abusive ex. Sarah met her at the door herself, showed her the room with the view of the water, helped carry in the duffels full of whatever life they'd managed to pack. I watched from the porch as Sarah knelt to talk to the little boy, eye level, promising him the dock was perfect for skipping stones.
Something in my chest unclenched completely in that moment. By summer, the place was rarely empty. Women came for a few weeks, a few months, sometimes longer. They left with job leads, new apartments, custody papers, confidence they hadn't had when they arrived. Ellen's Haven became a part of the community the way our family never quite had been before. Sarah still lived with me in the Elm Street house, not out of necessity anymore, but choice. We turned the downstairs den into an office for the foundation we set up together, Zoe Family Foundation, officially. I handled investments and property management. She handled programs and people. We met every Friday evening on the porch with iced tea or wine, depending on the weather, and went over budgets, grant applications, resident progress reports. One August evening, as fireflies blinked over the backyard, Sarah set a folder on the table between us. "Dad, look at this."
Inside were acceptance letters, a full scholarship to the State University's Master of Social Work program, and another from a National Foundation for Emerging Leaders in Nonprofit Work, $20,000 stipend, mentorship, travel to conferences. "I got both," she said quietly, "but only if I want them." I raised an eyebrow. "And do you?" "Yes, but only if I can keep living here, keep running Ellen's Haven, keep being your partner in this, not just your daughter." I felt my eyes sting. "You never stopped being my partner, sweetheart. You just had to grow into it." She smiled, the kind that reached every corner of her face, and we clinked glasses. Fall brought changes. Sarah started her master's classes, driving to campus 3 evenings a week. She kept the weekend warehouse shifts for another year, finally quitting only when the foundation could afford to pay her a real salary as executive director. Carla took over more day-to-day operations at the cabin, thriving in the role. I sold 2 of the rental properties, the ones needing the most repairs, and used the proceeds to add a small counseling wing to Ellen's Haven. Quiet therapy rooms with lake views, a playroom for kids, a computer lab for job searches and online classes. One October afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail, forwarded from Sarah's old apartment address, postmarked from a federal prison in Texas. Mark. Sarah brought it to the kitchen table without opening it. "He wants to apologize, says he's in a program, found God, regrets everything, asks if I can forgive him. What do you feel?" She thought for a long moment. "Nothing," she said finally. "Not anger, not pity, just distance, like he's someone I knew in another life." "Are you going to write back?" "No." She tore the envelope in half, then quarters, dropped the pieces in the trash. "Some doors need to stay closed." I nodded. Ellen would have approved. Thanksgiving that year was at the cabin. 23 people around folding tables stretched across the living room and porch. Current residents, a few graduates who'd come back to help cook, Carla and her grandkids, Mrs. Henderson from next door, even David Lang and his wife. Sarah orchestrated the whole thing like a general. Turkeys in the oven, kids setting the table, residents sharing what they were thankful for. When it was her turn, she stood at the head of the table, glass raised. "To Mom," she said, voice steady, "who built more than any of us knew and trusted us to figure it out. And to Dad, who taught me real love sometimes means letting someone fall far enough to learn how to stand." Every eye turned to me. I felt heat in my cheeks, but I raised my glass too. "To family," I said, "the kind you're born with and the kind you choose." The cheer that went up rattled the windows. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Sarah and I sat on the dock like we used to when she was small. The moon was full, laying a silver path across the water. "Dad," she said softly, "do you ever regret it, letting me suffer like that?" I considered the question carefully. Regret is a strong word. I hated watching you hurt, every single day, but I don't regret the outcome. Look at you now. Look at what we've built. She leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was 10. "Dad, I was so angry when you told me the truth.
For about 5 minutes. Then I realized you gave me the greatest gift anyone ever could. You gave me myself back. The person I was supposed to be, not the one Mark turned me into, not the one I let myself become. We sat in silence until the cold drove us inside. Winter came again. Sarah graduated with her master's in May, top of her class. The foundation grew, more grants, a second location in the next county. She hired staff, trained them the way Carla had trained her, with patience and respect. One June morning, I found her in Ellen's rocking chair on the porch reading a letter with tears on her cheeks. "Good news or bad?" I asked, handing her coffee. "Good," she said, wiping her eyes. "One of our first residents, the young mom with the 2 kids, she just got promoted to manager at her job, sent me a picture of her new business cards and a note that says Ellen's Haven saved her life." I sat in the chair next to her, the one that had always been mine. "Think your mother knows?" I asked. Sarah smiled through the tears. "She probably is organizing the whole thing from upstairs." That afternoon, we drove to the cemetery. Haven't been often. Ellen always said we'd rather live fully than visit graves, but it felt right that day. We brought flowers from the cabin garden. Standing there, side by side, Sarah spoke first. "Thanks, Mom," she said to the headstone, "for the empire you built in secret, for trusting Dad to use it wisely, for teaching us both what really matters." I added my own quiet words. "We did it, love. She's everything you hoped she'd be, and more." On the drive home, Sarah said suddenly, "Dad, I want to change my name on the foundation paperwork." "To what?" "To Ellen's Haven Foundation by Adam and Sarah Zoe." I glanced at her. "You sure?" "Completely. It was always both of you, and now it's both of us." That night, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of Ellen's favorite red, the last bottle from the case we'd saved for special occasions. The stars were bright, the air warm with summer promise. I raised the glass to the sky. "We did good, Ellen. Better than good." And for the first time since the day she left us, I felt her answer. Not in words, but in the peace that settled over the house, over Sarah sleeping soundly upstairs, over the life we'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Justice hadn't come as punishment. It had come as growth, as healing, as family, stronger, deeper, and truer than it had ever been before. And that was worth more than any fortune Ellen could have left us.